you who don't know, is a nonprofit photo business trade organization. And we're happy to have you guys come out tonight. And Rosh Sillars, our local photographer, and what I consider one of the pricing experts, a go-to. He's going to give a really great presentation about pricing and how to price your work. He has a really great presentation, and we look forward to learning some new things. So,
thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you for all being here. It'll be a little intimidating because we have Blake Disher here, who is probably one of the people that beat a lot of the stuff that I'm about to talk about into my head. Sometimes nicely, sometimes, well, anyway. So, no, it's a community, and we all learn, and we all start from the very beginning. And let me assure you of one thing. We don't always get it right every time. It's just a fact. We always learn. But there are three things that are important to understand in the process. Let me, first of all, I want to start off with this. The idea of a photographer. I don't want you to be a photographer. In my career, I've learned one thing. I am not looking for clients who are looking for a photographer. This market is way too saturated. We're so far past the idea of competition because there is so much competition. We're all competing against cell phones. We're all competing against people who are just getting into the business, which is fine, and people who have been in the business 100 years, which is fine. But I'm not looking for people who want a photographer. I want people who want me, want my portfolio. And I'm going to explain a lot of that stuff as we go along. If you're out there looking for people looking for a photographer, you're going to be working in the commodity system, which sometimes works when you got to pay a bill, but don't bank your career on it long term if you want to be a full-time photographer. Okay? So, a photographer is not what you want to be. You want to be who you are and what your name is. So, there are three elements, very important elements, to developing your pricing structure and the way you go about it. And you're going to have to figure this out on your own, because it's custom to each one of us. Remember, we're not really competing against anybody except who? Who are you competing against? Yourself. If you try to compete against other people, you're just going to lose every time. Either they're just better. I mean, there's basic facts. We've had bids here, and I'm sure Blake can attest to this, and other people who've been in the business for a while, where one person bid $50, another one bid $5,000, another one bid $50,000. You say, well, that $50,000 didn't get the job. Very well may not have, but there's a fact, the reason why they bid $50,000 is because they can get it. And it's happened to us here. It was just because they had something that we don't, and we'll discuss what that is in a few moments. But there are three main important elements. First of all, a very basic element. How many of you know what this means? What is that? Cost of doing business. Is that standard for everyone? No, not at all. Everybody's cost of doing business. The cost for me to run this place and all the elements. But that's your starting point. That's not necessarily what your price is, but it's your starting point. You have to understand where to start. How much does it really cost? And you might be surprised how much it really costs to run your business. There are a number of factors to consider, and it's well beyond the basics. A lot of times people think, okay, I have a camera. That's all I need. I already have the camera. Since I have a camera, I'm in business. I don't need anything else. There's no other costs, so I can just charge $50. Well, maybe some people can. But how are you going to scale that? I have found many times where people say, I don't care about my price because, I already have another job. But my goal is to become a full-time photographer. How many of you think that's going to happen? Well, probably not. But why? Let's not be rude about it. Why? Why would that not happen? If they're out there going the cheapest they possibly can with the goal of someday, they have support now, they're living, they're okay, but the goal to be a photographer full time. Why might it be tough if you're starting out at a really low price?
We get locked into them.
You get locked into it. You're used to those prices, and now you're thinking, oh, I got $100 to go for an hour to take a photograph? That's amazing. If I could scale that up, it would be awesome. But think about it. How hard was it, and how long did it take for you just to get that one job for $100? Right? You going to have another one tomorrow? Or that afternoon?
Or 6 that day.
Or 6 that day. How much energy and how much does it cost to do that, scale that, and become that? And a lot of times, photographers who, people who want inexpensive photographers, refer photographers to other people who want a inexpensive photographer. So you're setting yourself up. Does that mean that I have never been super cheap and done anything at any point in my career? Absolutely not. And I'm sure I've underbid stuff today. I'm sure I've overbid stuff. We all do. We just have to use the tools that we have, which of course is what we're going to talk about, to give us the best shot possible. And that's quite often why I don't go for the A photographer situation, because quite often I'm going to be bidding against a bunch of people, and I rarely bid, quite honestly. Most of my work is people who found me online. That's another element, but they found me online and said, oh, we want you. How much is it? When I get RFPs, it's very rare that I actually fill them out, because I'm going to lose every time. I'm going to be way too expensive. This doesn't happen. Huh? Oh, that's, yeah. Request for proposal. Sorry. Thank you, Blake. So, money. How much do you want to make is another factor. How much do you feel you need to survive? I mean, you can say, okay, I want to make $200,000 a year. I want to make $1 million. Okay, that's... How much does it cost for you to really live? What is your expense for your current rent or mortgage and the kids and the insurance and the dog and all that stuff? What do you really need to make? Start there and then build off of that. That has to be part of it. Because if you start with, hey, $50 sounds good, you're not really thinking about what you need down the road. It's not, again, the scalable element. Making you think ahead of what you really need to be at. And that does not mean you have to start there. I'm not saying that, okay, now once we do the calculations, which we'll go through, doesn't mean you have to start there, but at least you have a target of where you need to build up to. Because sometimes we just need to build up with a little confidence over time. Start here and then build a little more. And I'll share with you how I like to go about that moving forward. So again, you have your cost of doing business. You have how much do you actually want to make. Then you have all those other expenses that you generally don't think about. Insurance. So you already have a camera. Well, what if it breaks? What about, what about if the assistants? What about, here's something that a lot of people forget about is the fact that a growing company costs more money to run. So what it costs you today, if you want to double the size of your revenue, it's going to be more expensive to run that business a year from now. And you may need more support team, may need more equipment. Who knows? There are a number. Maybe it needs more marketing. A lot of times to really scale, we have to invest in the marketing side. Well, we need to be able to recoup that too. We are a business. And I know a lot of times we get into the photography business. A lot of people get into photography. I hear it all the time, and maybe you do too. I want to be a photographer. I don't want to be a business owner. Well, if you're going out there with the camera to make money, what are you? A business owner. So you have to think that way. I am a business owner. I'm using photography as my main vehicle for producing my income. And then we have to look at the calendar now. Okay, so what is our cost of doing business? How much is it going to cost what do we need to make within a year? Okay? Now, let's look at how many jobs we had last year. How many days or weeks or whatever it may be. So when we add those elements that we went through, we add up all that, and I highly encourage you to do that exercise. Go through and write everything down, how much it's going to cost, including how much you want to make. Get it out, everything you can possibly think of. Give yourself that bottom line number for a year or a month or whatever. Then figure out how many jobs did you have last year, or how many hours did you work in total that turn into days, and divide the number of days into that number. And there is what we call a day rate. Okay? I'm going to talk about day rates, but let me say this in the beginning. I generally like to refer to day rates as kind of a point I use for as an internal number. Day rates are an internal number. I generally rarely use day rates or hourly rates except for maybe events. Events that can be very appropriate. So I will use that, but we'll talk about that when we get into that in a few moments. So do that exercise. Add everything up. How many days, and you'll be surprised. It's probably a lot more. And then you can break it down to hours. You can even break it down into minutes. Why minutes? Well, someone asks you to pull something from archive. That happened to me the other day. Something that I photographed a few years ago. Hey, could you get this image out? We decided we want it. Well, how much time did that take? Not that I'm necessarily going to charge that person. It just depends. I may say, okay, no problem, but if you need some more, I'll have to charge you this amount. I always like to give like a warning shot, you know, and go from there. But to understand what your time and effort and everything you do in the pre-production, post-production, because our rates are not all about the day we're shooting. Especially today. I mean, it used to be we would be a lot of pre-production, and then we photograph, and then we turn the film in, right? Now, I mean, if it's an agency, we might have pre-pro meetings and things like that, pre-production meetings, but a lot of our business is on the backside too. And we need to account for that time. That's our time, and so we also have to consider that as part of our costs. Okay, so there's the count. Figure that out. Okay, second part of the equation. We know our cost of doing business, how much on average per day we need to make or per hour we need to make, and we can base it off of that. Now it's use. How is that photograph going to be used? Why is that? Well, the value of a photograph is different for a little shop in Royal Oak, put a flyer on the front of their window, versus a big company who's going to do a multi-million-dollar campaign and billboards across the country. The value of the photograph is different. And understanding that value, and I'm going to show you how I recommend going about this, because sometimes it's hard to say, well, okay, yeah, but how much do I charge for usage? I have a way that I think it kind of takes the emotion out of it. And that's a key word I just used, emotion. The photography, pricing in general is very, very hard. And let me assure you, even I prefer to hand it off to somebody else to figure it out for me. And I write articles on this stuff, I speak on it. I don't even like the price. I just can you just take care of this? And you know, obviously I give the guidelines, and quite often, and that's April who I hand it off to, and quite often I'll say, sometimes I'll say, oh, I'll get it. She's like, no, I'll take it. We want to make money. I mean, trust me, we all have to deal with it. So sometimes having that third party help you out is important. But understanding it, more than anything, understanding that there is value in the usage, and there's more value, you know, obviously the bigger the usage, a lot of ways you can approach usage, which we'll talk about, but you should have a system in mind, already set up. By the time you bid or estimate your next job, you should have a system of usage, understanding how you add an additional premium to your base price for each type of a client. And generally, it can be through many different directions. It can be through, again, local, where it's going to be placed, how it's going to be seen, how many eyeballs are going to be looking at your photograph, maybe in a local store. You know, maybe it's local usage or national usage. So you can actually have a list, you know, where you say, okay, for local usage, I like to use, for me, Michigan usage. So everything I do in Michigan, I just put under Michigan usage. Right or wrong, you know? Maybe in some cases I'm too low, some cases I'm too high by generalizing like that. But it works out for me. Kind of makes life easier, just making it easy to just do business. I have a set rate system. I know what I'm going to charge in most cases. But if it's regional, I know what to do next. If it's national, I know what to do next. And a lot of times, the system I use, which I'll show you, takes that emotional part out of it, because it really can be hard. Oh, yeah, I generally charge $500 an image, but they're saying national usage. Well, what do I do now? I know I need to charge more, but how much? You know, and it's like, oh, wow, if I said another $500, would that be too much, or $1,000? Or you start going down that path. So I prefer to take that dollar amount out, and I'll share that with you. Okay, so the next way, so where it's going to be used, you know, in terms of national use, regional use, based on, you know, the type of company it is. That's one way to look at it. It's a general term that can be interpreted many different ways. Another thing that's very common these days is actually eyeballs and web views. A lot of our photographs are used on the web. How many unique visitors does that website receive each month? Or is that, you know, so if it's the front page of a website, if they get 30,000 unique views a month, you should have a rate for 30,000, or like a range between, just kind of the way would you maybe through distribution of a brochure. distribution of brochure, they're going to print 10,000, 100,000, we would have different rates per the amount of printed materials. Well, you can do the same thing with the web. In theory, say, okay, if it's under 10,000 views per month, here's my rate. It may be my standard Michigan rate, my local rate. And if it's 10,000 to 50, it could be the regional rate, that kind of a thing. And you can build it off of there. But that's a good way to go about it, so you are actually getting paid for the value of that image based on the value for that client. Of course, now we have copyright to consider. That is often asked for, the copyright, or not even a discussion. But here's the basic fact. When you take an image, you click that shutter, you're the proud owner of a copyright. That's it. Yes, registering is a good idea, but you still own a copyright. Registering helps you in terms of damages and court situations. We can Blake could probably give you better information on that than myself. But the point is, there is value in that copyright, and you should have, because everybody's asking for it, a price for it. Even if quite often what I will say is, let me save you some money. I think I probably got that from Blake. Let me save you some money. Let me give you a different usage package that's appropriate for you. Because quite often I'll start asking questions. One of the best things you can possibly do when bidding a job is ask a lot of questions. And keep asking questions, because the more questions you ask, the more of a good sense of what it will take to create the image. A lot of times, we're frozen because we don't have the vision of their vision. We don't know really what they want, especially on the commercial side. But if you say, hey, do you have any examples of the type of photograph you're looking for? And if they send you a couple examples to help you, you say, oh, now I can see the production element. What level of production this is going to take. These are the things that I'm going to need. And that can be very, very helpful. And a lot of times, it's very common today. I see this a lot. I do this a lot. If people are really looking for, full outright, I'm trying not to step on my next slide, all the rights kinds of stuff, I'll ask, let me save you some money and give you unlimited usage for a specific period of time. And if you ask questions like, so you want all the rights to this photograph? Well, that's what they told me I needed to get. Say, well, how often do you change up your campaigns? Like, well, every 2 years. Oh, so you really don't need, are you going to resell these photographs? Because the honest truth is, unless they're going to take these images and actually resell the photographs, they really don't need the copyright. I mean, sometimes there's proprietary stuff and they just feel more safe about it, and I get that. But if you say, okay, how about I give you unlimited usage for 3 years? So that's a year longer than the 2 years that they normally ask. They feel safe. And I won't use them for anything else. I won't resell them or anything like that for that situation. And here's the bottom line. You can negotiate anything. You can say, on the photo shoot, he got his bid done. Which is what he was doing. You can ask for, any kind of a scenario you could possibly think of, including, I want green M&Ms, on location or whatever. I mean, there's so many different ways to approach there's no set standard what you have to do. You are in charge in how you approach and work with that client. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to accept it, but you have more flexibility than you really probably believe you do. And the best way to get there is to ask a lot of questions. And those questions will help you get there. Now, as I waffle back and forth, that didn't get, I was thinking the other slide's coming later. I put this together this afternoon. So let me I'm going to step on that next slide. A lot of times we get work made for hire contracts. And that's basically saying we want to hire you, like for the day, because if you work for a company as their representative and they pay your 401k and your salary and everything, you're representing them. They own all the copyrights. So the work made for hire contract says, we're going to hire you during that time, and we're going to take all the rights, but you get to use your equipment, and when you're all done, guess what? You're fired. That's what work made for hire means. We get all the benefits of you, and you get all the benefits. Well, you get paid, of course, but you're fired. Until we need you again, we'll hire you again. That's what it means. So, a lot of times it's just become automatic that people put that. I can't tell you how many times that I really don't sign work made for hire contracts. Not to say I never have, and yes, I have in certain situations, especially for big agencies. Big agencies are getting bad. I mean, there are some contracts out there now that say not only is it work made for hire, but if we get sued,
You foot the bill, right?
you get it. We're passing it on to you. So take a look and make sure that you understand what is going on in those contracts. But it is, smaller, mid-sized companies, smaller agencies, a lot of times they'll cross that sucker right out. Say, okay, we get it. We understand. Sometimes the language is just in there. So understand, look for those words, work made for hire. Understand you have value, your copyright has value. The fact is, and this is, I think, a Susan Carr thing that has always stuck with me. At least that's where I got it from. And that was, if your copyright wasn't valuable, then why is everyone working so hard to get it? It has value. They wouldn't be asking. And let's even take that to your photograph. If they didn't need a photograph, if they didn't see there was any value, they would be asking you to give them a bid for the photograph if there was no value to your photographs. So your photographs have value. That make sense? Okay. There's more into that, and I'll certainly answer more questions on that topic. So we have three things. First, our cost of doing business. Second, the use of the image. And third is our brand. And that, back to my original, that conversation of someone who bid $5,000 and someone who bid $50,000. The difference was the brand. They created their own brand. What is a brand? Best way I like to look at a brand, and it's not your logo, it's your reputation. Your brand is your reputation. And everything you do related to your brand, your reputation. When you look at a logo is a symbol of how people think about you or don't. If they see your photo and that's your brand is your photo, a specific photo, or your signature, whatever it may be, if they don't recognize it, there is nothing. Well, then you have a branding problem, because nobody knows. But if people start to know your symbol or something related to you, and they get a reaction like, oh, that's a really cool photographer. Have you seen their work? That's a positive brand. And people build up and build their brands. There are many situations. I have lost jobs. For people who were double my price. It's because they were looking for something specific. I had a creative director sitting right there. He's there. He's been a donor for years, and now he's doing mechanic. And I said, he wants to do some photography work, and I was talking to him about it. I said, yeah, it is the brand element. It's like, you put out a bid for photographers, and you get all these photographers bidding, jockeying, and you pick the lowest price as long as they seem competent, right? But when you want that guy or that girl in Europe, what do? You call them up and say, how much? 50 grand, 100 grand, plus all expenses? Okay, thanks. Was there any bidding? No. They wanted that person. And you can do that at a certain level yourself. And that's when I went back to, I don't want people who want a photographer as my mantra, And I want people who want my work, my style. They know what they're getting. I get fewer complaints, too, by the way. Because if they wanted a certain style, they asked me to do a portrait, and they've been looking at Matt's work all day long, or even Jeff. Jeff does great portrait work. I would say these two guys are much better at corporate portrait than I am, but they've been looking at them, but they're too expensive, so they went to me. And then I take that photograph. Man, it's not what we were expecting. It's not what we wanted. It was a totally different. Do you see how that can happen? That's the lowest price scenario, and that can happen. So I mostly want people who want me. So developing your brand. is super important, and keeping that. Understanding that only you have your eye. Who are we competing against?
My eyes.
Your eyes. You're not competing against anyone but you. There are too many people, and I'll say it again, you'll hear me say it again, there are too many photographers out there or scenarios for people to pick up their iPhone, and you are competing against you, and only you have your eye. You have to understand that and build off of that. I'm saying this as someone who wants to grow a business as a photographer, not somebody who, has a camera and wants to go out and take pictures and maybe get a few bucks here and there. Okay, fine, But if you really want to make it today, that's the way you have to approach this. This is a mindset. This pricing conversation is a mindset. You're the only one with your eye. That's $50,000. Jeff, was it $50,000 that one person bid for that one job you had?
Yeah, the engineering job. So
Yeah.
I bid actually
It was
$25,000.
$25,000.
I bid 5,000.
$5,000. Someone bid something really low, right?
Yeah, $500.
Yeah, and $500
About 2 full days of shooting.
for
So I
$500,
billed I estimated 5,000.
which seems about, I guess within range, and
That's including-
the 25,000. But the conversation, we're kind of giggling about it, and I'm like, but that person is going,
Well, they were engineers, so we're not going to go with the cheapest bidder.
but did they go with the 25?
No.
No, they went with you, right? Yeah, but
That's
person.
one job that I got, and I've lost many too.
We all have. But the point being is that person who bid $25,000 bids $25,000 all day long and gets many of them. They may not have to work as hard, as many days, right? So, $10,000 a day, not that outrageously uncommon among people who are doing it. So that's something to consider. It's you. You have to consider who you are, who your brand is, and so that we have those 3 elements. What are the 3 elements?
Price.
Cost of doing business,
Usage.
usage,
Brand.
and your brand. Those are the 3 things that create your price. And quite often, it is very rare that other people can increase your rates based on your brand. You have to do that. And you have to be confident about it. And you have to understand that if you're going to go out, say, tomorrow and say every job from this point on is 10 grand, well, then you may have to understand you're going to lose a few jobs first until you find the right people. But remember what we said, people who and there are many more, but people who charge $50 for a photograph, those clients refer them to
$50 photograph people.
right, and people who hire $10,000 a day photographers refer $10,000 a day photographers to other people who need a $10,000 a day photographer. They can't, they need to make sure. And the brand, obviously, it says something. I mean, it really it's not easy. I'm not sitting here saying, okay, everybody, this is so easy. We got this down. But these are the rules. I'm teaching you the rules and what's going on because, again, there is so much opportunity, but there's also so many photographers. Photography is mandatory today. We've never been at any point in history where we needed more photography. The fact is, though, a lot of people are doing it themselves with their phones or hiring people, their friend who has a nice camera, and so forth. So we have to be able to offer something in a way that separates ourselves from the competition, that will give them a good reason to want to hire you. And a lot of times it's networking. Sometimes it purely is relationships. You just have developed the right relationships. Sometimes we just get darn lucky. We just got a good relationship with someone and they just keep feeding us work and it's in the budget, they just keep sending it our way. It takes time sometimes to find that, but that can happen. Day rates. So how can we go about our process? So we talked about cost of doing business. Well, that's where we kind of figure out our day rate. And then, of course, we can add usage in our brand element and so forth. Day rates can work pretty well for events. you know, an hourly even, I'm good with that. I don't have a problem. You have a question, Lee?
Yes, when you start to price according to your brand, do you price according to the creative, the shooting fee, or the licensing fee, or both?
It could be on top of both. Take that, and I'll show you what I would do. I'm not going to leave you all hanging on that. Okay, but yeah, that's a good question, and there are a number of ways to break this down. And often when you do day rates, you break everything down too. You have your creative fee, and then you have all, you know, the assistant, and maybe you're renting a studio, maybe you have location fees. I mean, there are a number of different things you could have that you break it all out, and it's the day rate. And it's okay. I'll share with you why I prefer a different method. Some people like it, some people don't. I have personally made more money because of that method than I have with day rates. So, and that would be, oh, next one, not this one. This one's project. Project pricing is another way to go about it. And this is a common way, if, for example, if you have what I refer to as an and. You are a photographer and videographer, writer, designer. It's a good way to go. You can package price something, all of the work you're going to do in one package. You can do this with regular photography, maybe a multi-day job and there's a lot of production to it. You can give them just a flat-out rate and for the project. And there's nothing wrong with doing that too. But again, give yourself guidelines for all of these things. Again, I'm not leaving you hanging with this stuff. I'll give you some more tools to help you out, more things to think about. The other one, all right, yeah, that's right. Okay, the other one is per image pricing. And this is what I like to use. I probably give Blake credit beating me in the head with this one, I think. I don't know. Maybe the case, maybe not. Maybe I probably give Blake credit for more things than he actually showed me over the years, but he takes them all. But this is what I often, the way I usually present it. Let's say, for sake of argument, a website company came to you and they said, we need 10 images, photographed during the day, 10 images, and we'll just call it standard usage. We'll know, just keep it simple. And so, okay, you go to them, say, okay, $1,500 for my day and $500 in expenses. So $2,000, right? So it's time to take your photographs. And you get done, you're good. You're highly productive. Bam, you're done at 1. What do they want next?
More than
Pardon?
one more shot.
Maybe another shot?
Or 5 more.
Or 5 more? Or how about we're done? We don't need any more. You want a discount. What'd you do? Did you work all day? I don't get paid if I don't work all day. You worked half a day. I want a discount.
Well,
Now-
now, go and give him any photos.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's a great way to build relationships. Yeah, let's use Lewis. Okay, you don't get any photographs. Or you can say, hey, you booked me for a full day. I want my money. Great, another relationship building technique. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But what about, as Blake said, more photographs. Okay, now they add more photographs. Maybe you get, it's 4 o'clock and you have an hour left.
Yeah, but didn't you say you would agree to a certain amount of photographs?
You could do that. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you had agreed to a certain
Sure,
amount of photographs.
absolutely.
His example is a day rate. He's giving you the day
I'm
rate.
giving you day rate.
You
He
didn't
gave the
mention
client a day
photos.
rate.
Okay, you didn't
Yeah,
mention the amount
10
of photos.
photographs. Yeah, no, you're right. We said 10 photographs.
Okay, well, that's all I'm going by.
Okay,
So
good.
you delivered.
Yeah, I deliver. Absolutely. But the client still asks, do you think the client never asked for more?
I haven't had the problem. So.
Okay, well, you are special.
No, I just
I
never
know,
had
I know.
the problem.
Yeah, no, honestly, and I
I
agree.
would say
Good
I
clients.
delivered.
Yeah, you
You know,
have.
you've asked me, I delivered.
Right.
I'm done.
Absolutely. But the fact is you're done at 1.
You know
We
where
only
that
shot 4 hours. Can I get a half day rate? You only shot 4 hours, man. You said you're going to do this for 8.
Well, then I'll say I give you half the photos.
And there's your client relationship going down the tubes.
Well, whather.
But that's what I'm pointing.
saying.
Okay,
Whatever.
I'm pointing out the problem with the day rate.
Yeah.
That's one of many scenarios that can happen with the day rate. So how about, what if I said, okay, so it's the same scenario, but instead, I'll do it for what? See, 10 images, $200 an image, right? Now it's a little easier to swallow, isn't it? Because first of all, $1,500 a day. I don't make $1,500 a day. Why are you trying to make $1,500 a day? I mean, they don't know that the fact is that's like your only job this month. I mean, right? I mean, they don't know that I'm $1,500. That's what I'm living off this 2 weeks. So the point being is that you have to. They don't know all the details, nor do they care. We like to think that they really care about the plight of the photographer. No, they don't.
Absolutely not.
Has this really happened where you were hired for a day
Or
with
anybody
10
else for the
photographs? And you were done with the 10 photographs and they asked you to keep taking photographs?
You know where it happens an
All the
awful
time.
lot?
All
It
the
happens
time.
a ton in headshots. If you do corporate headshots,
Yeah.
because there's always Bob who just came in from a meeting and can we add Bob to the list?
Absolutely.
Because I've done a ton of headshots, but
And
Right,
if you price
and
it like
Well,
Rosh
you
just
can make
said,
up for that in
yeah,
post.
but never for a day rate, just per headshot.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's the
another
per
person.
image pricing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so if you say $200, there's two things going on here. First of all, you've taken the value of your photographs off of time
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right,
and put it on the image where it belongs, right?
right.
You can put it in post. Charge more in post.
You
Say, I
could-
have no
if-
problem doing that, but it's gonna add toward the post time.
You could do that. You can have a separate price for post. You can put it in the per image. I like to be as simple as possible and put it all in the per image,
Right.
including my post, up to a certain level. I mean, there's a certain level that say, okay, you're asking for more than.
How do you handle
Basic
usage when you're doing a per image?
So-
Just add it on later?
Well, no, I would include it in the per image price, and I'll show you how I would do that too, in how I would break it down. But I still break it down. I try to put everything I possibly can to keep it as simple as possible. Here, you know what? We're in a tough environment. I want to make doing business with me as easy as possible. And so now I took 10 photographs. I am done at 1 o'clock. What do they want? To go to lunch because we're done. Great day. We got done early. We gave them something super valuable, their time for the whole afternoon. I gave them what they wanted. No one's trying to get a discount because it had nothing to do with time. Nothing to do with time. Now, to Blake's example, doing headshots, you said 10 headshots and Bob and Joe and Sally all come in and we have 3 more. Do I want to do them? Yeah, I'm just making another $600.
Oh,
Right.
you're not on the date rate anymore, okay.
Yeah, we're on per image now.
But at
All right,
the
all right.
same time, we had 10 people to photograph, but only 5 are here today.
That's fine.
That's fine. You're
That's
done.
fine. Because now I'm flexible. They're not being charged a full day going back to the client relationship. They're getting what they paid for. And they're not just like, wow, remember that we had that one photographer in, they said, we were here all day. I'm sorry, only 5 of your employees. It's a day for us to be here. We sat around waiting all day. Or we could hire Rosh and he'll pay for what comes through. And if there's more, and let me tell you something. I have confidence in my photography. I hope you have confidence in photography. I shoot a lot of food. And I do a lot of situations where they say, we need 7, 10 photographs, and they buy 20, 30. Happens all the time. And you know what? I've even had situations where they did not buy any of them. And I said, okay. You know when that happened last? 3 years ago. The value of getting those more and more, I know the numbers. It does not happen. I am confident that they're going to actually want to buy more. I just did that with a chain, a restaurant chain. They hired me to photograph 30 images. They bought 50. Because we're moving along, doing well, and built up. So the per image element really does give you flexibility, but a lot of times, and this is a big concern to a lot of photographers, it's like, but what if? Don't let what if stop you from making more money. It's gonna happen sometime. It will be a time where only 8 show up, or something's gonna get messed up. But the client is not freaking out that you have to do another day or reset it up. Okay, sometimes I do take a hit, but the number of times is so small compared to the times that I get more that it's worth it. As long as, and I say, no problem, I'm here for you. And I get repeat business.
Have you,
Sorry, I didn't.
Have you ever done something like, I didn't mean to interrupt, you can go
No.
first.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's say they say that, you know, one day, 10 people,
Mhm.
only 5 show up.
Mhm.
So now you have to go there twice.
Yep,
So,
I'm making the money.
no,
I'm still
I know,
making-
but I mean, I'm saying for showing up twice, do you put like, okay, if the 10 people are here that day, but if I have to come back, then there's gonna be like a travel fee or nothing.
If there's travel involved, I mean, you can. This is going back
Yeah,
to the
but
whole
you're nickel and
conversation. You
diming
can
at
do
that point.
whatever you want. You can apply scenarios, weather days. I mean, these are things for you to think. You have to think about what it costs you to do business. And if, man, the inconvenience of you going back is big, well, then you have a standard price. Here's my per image price. If I have to return, because quite often what I'll do is each day, for example, the first image is the higher price, and then it goes down, or at least the first image. So, and that's each day. So automatically, I get a little extra fee if I have to go back because this group was shot on this
Okay,
day.
that's what I was
So that's one
yeah.
way to approach it, and I often usually do that. This for the first image, then this for the 2 through 10, and then it may go down beyond that. So you can do this anyway. And another thing that I often hear about, well, you're going to be more than the people who are charging day rates. Not necessarily, only if they buy more images because you did a great job, right? You know, so you can not, if you can get 40 images done in a day, you're probably not going to charge $1,000 an image, right? Unless of course you have that brand element, right? So I mean, so you can break it down. You don't have to take yourself out of the market because you're doing per image, but you can certainly benefit from it. Yes, thank you.
My question was kind of the same as that one, but I had someone asked me to do photos at their doctor's office, but
Mhm.
there was, first they wanted me to have client interactions, and then they wanted to do headshots.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really know how to price that because it was kind of 2 separate kinds of jobs.
Lifestyle versus portrait.
Yeah, so I did have 2 different rates, and then they did have me come back to do more headshots. No, not the client interactions again, but the headshots. And because I was already coming, I went a little lower on the headshots, and then it became a problem having to come back.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know how to.
You know, yeah. I mean, I
So-
generally take it, but if I'm worried, I mean, I'm going off on a little bit different subject. If I'm worried about like costs I'll often say I need a minimum. Like if they ask for 10, I'll ask for, I'll say you have to buy 5 if there's high production involved, or you can separate production. But going back in those situations, I'll often just take it. If it's something where it's a smaller usage thing, a doctor's office, where I'm going to confuse the heck out of them if I tell them that, give them the difference between this type of photography because it's wait, you're taking a picture of people. I might
They
just
didn't have
find
a problem with it, but I felt like coming
it
back.
could.
was-
Yeah, it could.
That
I
became
mean,
a problem.
yeah. I don't have a good answer for that, quite honestly, because it's just, one of those you have to decide what's right for you and if you have a fee for coming back. It's okay. Again, you can do anything you want. The key here is to have a plan ahead of time.
Mhm.
You know what you do before you do it. Because the worst thing that can possibly happen is to guess every single time you have an assignment. You just know what to do. This is what I do, and this is the way I go about the process. So I know I did not at all answer your question, but I don't have.
Hey Rosh, before
Yes.
we move on, can you explain a little bit more about how you're tiering things?
Sure.
Like first, second,
First
third?
image would be a certain amount, okay? Say sake of argument, $500 for the first image and $375 for the rest. If I know it's a large number, maybe $250 beyond 20.
That
And-
protects you if somebody says, we had 10 people, but now we only have 5.
Yeah, or coming back.
Because you're still gonna make what you charge in a day.
Yeah, if I have
Or
to come
half a day.
back. I mean, I want to.
Or even if you have to come back, but you come back, you're still making that $500.
on the first shot, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
the
it protects
biggest, yeah, I was just gonna say, Jeff, I mean, the biggest nightmare is the guy that calls you up, you did those headshots at the dentist office, and now they want you to come back because they have one more person.
Right.
Right.
That's
And
what
that
I'm
will
saying.
happen.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's on the other side of the state, like-
yeah, and so, I mean.
Tell them to come to your studio if you have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
What if
how
you
I
don't?
would have priced that job that you were talking about is you could definitely handle it as 2 line items. You've got headshots over here
Yep.
and your
Yeah.
environmentals on the bottom.
I'd agree.
And the reason for that is because anybody in this room can shoot a headshot, no question asked. But not everybody in this room can light and do maybe as good a job as you could
Right.
on those environmentals. So there's more value in those environmentals.
Yeah, no, that's a good
And
point.
The usage is, well, I guess they're both for
Usage
websites.
is
Yeah.
the same.
Usage is
So-
the same, yeah.
But I had a lot of people contact me after and asked if they could use their headshots other places.
Yeah, of course. They want
Yeah,
to use
they
one
will.
LinkedIn,
Yeah.
they want to
Yeah.
And you just need to decide, is it okay today for the people, as long as it's been paid for, or if you want, if you have, you can use, for personal usage, sake of argument, for $25, at least they understand there's a value to that image and what they're doing,
Yeah.
you can do that.
Volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, but as far as those two types, I would automatically change it. If they blindsided me in the middle,
Yeah,
I've been known to cave and just say, I quoted you this price and we'll go through the process. But I may explain that this is normally something different. If I had the opportunity to bid ahead of time, it certainly would have been different. But we're all going to find situations where,
And chalk it up to education.
Yeah.
And now you know for next time.
right.
yeah, absolutely.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
I'm under the understanding that the agencies have a standard calculator for usage. Am I correct or?
That's their problem.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
that
no, but no, they may have something, they can do whatever.
As far as like an industry standard calculator.
No.
Not like.
I mean, I've not heard of that, but,
Okay.
but
I've heard
I
of
mean,
it, but I wasn't.
they may see what the value is to them.
They may tell you they have a calculator.
Yeah. They may say, look, we only pay so much. I mean, until they want the guy from Europe. It's always that scenario until they really want, that hot young lady photographer in Italy who's doing it all right now. Then they'll pay whatever it takes. So you have to consider that. There are always so many scenarios you can line item, doing per image pricing, you can line item things out, especially hard costs, travel, things like, I'll always line item that stuff out. I won't incorporate that. Assistance, things like that I'll take out, but everything else I'll put in there. And I explain what is in that per image. This is all inclusive and this is what it includes. And so I have some backstops in case things get a little goofy, which it will sometimes.
Do you increase the, like, let's say you're buying out of your own pocket, merchandise or tape or light bulbs or whatever?
Yeah.
Do you put a percentage on top of whatever the cost is for you doing it instead of that?
I use that in my calculation of cost of doing business for the most part. I mean, if I have a stylist come in with food and all that, then we'll have him do that separately.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So there's a lot we can unpack with per image pricing, and it's a big topic of mine. I love. There's so many scenarios, and there's some hybrids of that. I know some people do really well by they have a low day rate to cover them, and then combine per image beyond that. So you can combine all these techniques. You don't have to use it. You don't have to say, I am a per image pricing photographer and that's all I do. No, you could have a day rate for showing up and no matter what, and then per image after that. And maybe that day rate includes 2 images. I don't know. I mean, you can do any combination. There is no set rule or law. You will, especially for larger agencies, come up with face like a situation where everybody else is like bidding day rates. We can't accept your per image, and I have to make the choice. Is this something I want to do? Do I want to do a day rate in that situation? And I'll figure it all out if I want to go for it, if it's worth it to me. But it all depends. It all depends. Okay, let's talk about artwork. So this is a big one that people have. Your prints, your artwork, how much to charge. There are a few different ways to go about it, and the same things are really involved here. Obviously but more than anything, your brand is certainly a big part of doing, certainly a big part of pricing your artwork. You can price based on how much, sake of argument, maybe you do a 11 by 14 with a frame and all that, and then you can decide, okay, and my cost or whatever is double the price of what it costs me, or 3 times the price. We figured out the cost of doing business. We figured out all those things. That's one way to do it. Just double, triple, quadruple your price. Or I like to use the per inch price. So if a 10 by 10 at $1, right? That's 100 square inches, right? So that's $100. And it's a lot easier to increase your rate that way. That's the way that painters do it. It's more of a lot of art. I like doing it that way. And then, so if you say $1 per square inch, so now you always know how much, because we always get in these moments like, okay, I sold all these things, but someone just asked me for a 20 by 30. I've never sold it. How much do I have to it? Well, $1 per inch, 20 by 30. You can figure those inches. So you have a system. And when you feel you want to increase your rate, instead of going from $1, you can go to $1.25 per inch, and you can build up from that way. So that's the way. You can do it based on your cost, but I like doing the per inch method. It's kind of like the per image pricing method. It's kind of the way I like to do it, and the way I approach it. Okay, so a few things related to, just you get that phone call, you get that email, and they're asking for an estimate, a bid. Well, what do we know immediately? We know our cost of doing business, right? We start to ask questions. We ask a lot of questions. We ask for examples if we can. I often, a lot of times they have a layout or say, or even if it's just like, we're on your website, which image, got your attention? So at what level they're considering in terms of quality. There's nothing worse than someone saw a really high production image and then they describe something that's over here on your website, but they're expecting this. And so you misread them and you give them a poor price. Always ask a lot of questions and take time to think about it and call them back or email back. Don't immediately give a price. Always think about it. Yes?
Just back up briefly, explain that dollar per inch again.
$1 per inch thing? So if you have a 10 by 10 inch print, so if you do it per inch, 10 times 10 is what? 100. So $1 per square inch would be $100. All right?
Thank you.
So you're calling and you had your price. You're asking questions about how they're going to use the image. When do you need the images? All the possible questions you can. And you know what? You should write it down. Be prepared. Understand what are the questions you need to ask every single time. And I think it's really important to understand how you're going to increase these things. So you have your base rate. Some people say, oh, well, if I'm going from local to regional, I'm going to add $500. Some people do that, but I like to use percentages because it takes the emotion out. Because sometimes we ask ourselves, what do we do if this situation happens? And we're like, I don't know what I do when this situation happens. Well, have a percentage and write it out, put it on paper. If there's a website that has 50,000 unique visitors every month, I have my base price and I times it by this much. Every time. It just takes the emotional out immediately. And it's a lot easier to swallow. That makes sense? So you can do that if somebody wants to purchase the copyright. Have a line there that says, okay, 100%, double the price, or whatever it may be, whatever is right for you. Okay? If you have a situation where you're totally unsure with, international usage, you say, wow, that's crazy. Just put a number down right now before you have to answer somebody who calls you that I need international usage or whatever it may be. Think of all the scenarios you possibly have. And also write down the types of photography you do or are competent and you feel that you can do best. And then write down the ones that you feel like you would want to refer to other photographers. You have to remember it's your reputation. And sometimes referring to another good photographer is a good way to go rather than trying to do something on your own and never get a call back the next time around, right? So I like to use percentages, figure out all the different ways in which I can, all the scenarios I can run up against, and then how much do I add a percentage to that, again, versus a straight dollar amount. Does that make sense? Does that seem like it would be a little bit easier to swallow? Say it's almost like having the calculator think for you, rather than having to think about it. But the key thing to all this is writing it down. having your baseline. How much do I charge for food photography? Someone calls me right now for Metro Detroit usage of one of my photographs. How much am I charging per image? Was my first number and then all the additional numbers. I know what it is. It's just basics. I can think about it. But they have a scenario that kind of puts a wrench in it. Right? Well, I have a percentage instantly. Oh, I add 10% for that. Didn't even have to think much about it. It's all written down. So the more you do in advance, the better off you're going to be. Sorry, my brain has been glitching here. And so that's what this represents. Having a system down. Having a system of knowing what you do. Every single time someone emails you or calls you should not be a brand new exciting experience. You know, or a surprise, or oh my goodness, what do I do? Has that ever happened to anyone? Oh, come on now, raise some hands.
Still happens.
Yeah, it still happens. But if you have a system down, you know what questions to ask. You put everything in folders on your desktop. Have a Google Doc. Use Evernote. Something on your desktop you can just click on. I like to use Evernote. I can just click on Evernote. Okay, here it is. All the things I forgot, you know, I needed to consider. So these are the kinds of things. Organization, being ready, knowing who you are, and when we talk about that whole brand thing, when you feel like people are saying yes a little too quickly to your price,
You're charging them up.
yeah, just increase it 10%. Just automatically, and start building that brand of understanding and know, hey, maybe you'll lose some clients. A big question I often get is, okay, so you just raised your prices. I raised my prices about 20% this year, okay? So, what about your current clients? As far as I'm concerned, they're grandfathered in. Now, other people will say, well, they can find somebody else. And I've talked to some people, so that's fine. They can find someone. I'll even refer them to somebody who will do a good job for them. They're good people. I like to keep them, so I grandfather them in. Or, you know, if I'm going to raise their price, it may not be as much, but I'll give them a lot of warning to see if they balk or not. Like if I'm thinking, okay, 2019, I'm going to increase my prices 20%. I'm just going to call these folks and kind of say, hey, what do you think? I think I'm going to have to raise my prices in the beginning of the year. I'm just exploring it. What do you think if we restructure our current system? And it said, well, you know, it's been nice knowing you. Then I may have to reconsider if they say, oh, yeah, no problem. You're covered. But it doesn't hurt to ask. Another thing that I often find very valuable is part of my system on the phone is just asking, do you have a budget? I can't tell you how many times that budget was more than what I was probably going to charge. It happens.
Do it every time.
And yeah,
Every time.
but there are times where they'll say no, and there are times where, okay, now you have a sense, yeah, they're looking for $75, per image, or $250 a day. All right, I have a great photographer I can refer you to, or maybe not a great photographer, we'll say someone. We don't want to give too much for $250 a day. But the point being is I know what I'm going to do next. So being able to pre-qualify and understand, again, asking the questions of what they like.
Question,
Yeah.
what are the best sources for licensing fees?
What do you mean best sources?
All right, when you're trying to determine a use fee,
Yep.
and you have no idea
Right.
what
The document that's on your desktop or in your pocket that states if someone wants regional usage, I increase it by this amount, 50% or 20%. It can be anything you want, Lee.
Well,
It can be 10%. There's no rule.
I know that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to, as far as when you're first getting familiar with what rates are
Yeah.
in different situations.
You have your production. You have to understand the production element. You have to figure it all out. You have to understand where you stand and what your day rate is, and then what expenses you generally charge, or the production for a specific shoot, or if you do day rates, how you approach that, and then you have to have something there. And you know what? You can experiment. You can talk to other photographers to see what they do. A lot of times, my rates go up 50% or even 100% for big steps. Sometimes in certain scenarios, it's just an increase of 10%. It just depends on the scenario and how I'm comfortable. I have to get comfortable with these things too. So there is no set situation, but again, the point is start somewhere. Be conscious of the idea that you need to increase your rates if there's more usage. I mean, that's where you start, is just being mindful of that idea and build off of that, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try to wrap this around in my brain. So
Sure.
we're talking about usage, and then we're also talking about licensing, which can sort of be two different things. Now, I'm curious about any more, and you might want to help me out with this, Blake, that at least my experience is that unless you have a client that you've been established with for a long time and knows the game and has been around, like Gensler or SOM or something like that, talking about licensing can be a really tricky thing because a lot of people are like, I only get this for 3 years.
Right.
Screw you.
Right.
So kind of in the world, and I want to make it a little bit gentle in that a lot of us aren't shooting at that level. We're working with clients who know that. So, and I've known a lot of people that have lost a lot of jobs, but I said, and you get a 3-year license with it, and then they're like out the door. So how do you handle that anymore?
You know what?
Or do you find
just because it's so fluid today, I think that in many cases, I think the standard today is unlimited usage. That has almost become the standard.
Isn't that why the ASMP is great?
For unlimited usage?
Right now.
No.
For putting more value.
Well, yeah, to understand the business and the value.
Not giving your work away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yes, when you're dealing with the big
I'm not
dogs.
trying to take away from it. I'm
No,
just saying,
I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
right.
no.
Because I mean, again, unless you're dealing with the real heavy hitters, people
Right.
like 3. What do you?
Licensing comes up more if somebody says they want to use the image that you have. So
Yeah, now
Or
that's
specific
that-
period of
that
time, or
makes a
specific
little bit more
restrictions.
sense. Yeah, now I've done that with bigger companies too,
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this for 8 years. It's like,
Sure.
okay, that sort of deal.
They
But
just
when we
want
start
one
to get into that
image.
time, and clients anymore are kind of, they're gun shy about
And it's because it's, I really do think, we're pretty much in a era of, look, the fight is not between licensing, unless you are with a company who understands it. Really, the fight is between unlimited usage, or you taking all my copyrights.
Yeah, that's more
That's
what
really what the fight is. And in most cases. So yes, there are situations you can still license, and they understand the language, and you should understand the language, because when you're having that conversation, you need to be able to talk the game and understand it. But especially for local stuff, local people,
Well,
you know
that's
what?
what I
I
mean.
just say unlimited usage. I own the copyright, or if they ask me, say, don't worry about it, because I'll ask them the question. Say, well, I mean, I don't own it. Well, are you going to resell this photograph?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, well, that's what I say to them, and they're like, no, I don't have to resell it. So you have all you need for this price, and this just allows me to use it in my portfolio and things like that. And if you don't need it anymore in a few years, and it's not proprietary stuff, maybe I can sell it for stock.
Sometimes I use the example with the music industry. It's like you buy a CD of Led Zeppelin, you don't own Led Zeppelin's music.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they'll
Or
understand that a lot easier.
Software is
Yeah.
a great one.
Yeah, it's like, no, like you can't resell Led Zeppelin's music to Cadillac to use for a commercial.
And
You
all
have
this
to go-
goes back to brand too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you got a good brand.
So when it comes like
charge
local
more.
stuff, I can usually explain it better that way than like through licensing and usage, and I'll say,
Well,
do you really
Yeah,
want
there's
to?
real world examples for all of that.
well, usage. If we're having the copyright conversation,
Right.
then yes, that's where I go.
Yeah,
Say,
that's where
well,
I go.
if you bought that painting, can you make as many, or get to talk maybe his favorite sports team and say, now can you make as many copies of that with their logo on it and go out and sell it? Well, no. Well, you bought it. It's the same kind of. You have a basic. Usually, I use software as my example. But
that's fine.
if you, as long as you have
Software's a good
something,
one,
yeah, if you use that, you can't keep reselling your Photoshop to other people because you bought it, right?
can't.
Are you saying unlimited usage within a certain spelled out
Software's good.
perimeter?
Yeah, I'll usually say you have unlimited usage within Michigan. If you go outside Michigan, let's talk about, or if you're, as your company grows, let me know. I may have to readjust the price for future stuff.
Yeah, well,
I don't go back to them very often.
Let's say you're taking a photograph of a whole suit, right?
Yeah.
And you're giving them a limited usage, but they wanna use it on the, now that they're gonna do a, you know, they're gonna start marketing their soup and they're gonna put it on cans and they're gonna use that photograph.
I
What do you do
understand.
then?
Well, it depends on the scenario. It really does. I mean, it depends on the relationship scenario. It just depends. Is it worth the fight? If I said unlimited usage, I'd probably said unlimited usage. That's where it gets into the questions and asking questions and where they plan to go with the photograph. If I am unsure, I may have to protect myself a little bit more. Sometimes people are flaky. You can tell. Sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes you get burned. Sometimes you have to decide, is it worth going after them after you gave them a contract?
For headshots, absolutely.
So,
They're gonna need a new one in 2 years.
yeah. So,
Just depends on the client.
yeah, it depends on
I
what
know
it
some
is you're
people
selling
are
and what
using
you're
their
doing.
high school yearbook for headshots.
That's a good
And they're like
point. That's a good
80,
point.
you know?
That is a good point.
So it's
Actors
important-
can't do that though.
It's important to have everything in writing, whether you have a system down within your estimates and they approve it. Everything should be in writing in some way, whether it's through your estimates, but contracts more formal. That's always the better way to do it. It just depends on your client and the way you approach it. I have basic backstops, and the way I do business tends to work pretty well for me. Everybody has, you know, I definitely, if you get into bigger money, if you can't afford to lose the money that you're about to get involved with, you have a contract, hands down. It's a lot of the smaller clients, I say, if you approve this estimate, sign it, send it back, all the details are on it, you know, I'll go with that. Could I get burned? I haven't. Could I still get burned? Absolutely. But look, it's a competitive environment. I think it's easy to do business. If I start sending contracts to smaller folks, but there are times you do need to have a contract, and it's good. And you should probably have one prepared. You know, now, kind of like the list of questions, you should probably have and make that a best practice. And if that's something you're most comfortable doing every single time, having a contract, then do it. I'm not trying to dissuade you in any way, shape, or form from doing that. I'm just sharing, you know, candidly some of the stuff that I do. There you go. So ultimately, your job, and I'm just going to repeat a bunch of things I've already said just to reinforce it, is the fact is you need to you compete with you. If you try to compete with everybody else, you're going to have a very hard time. Get out there, build relationships, show them why you are the person, you know, to hire. Look for relationships. Don't look for people who want a photographer. You want people who want you. And that takes you to get out there, build those relationships. And if you're better at building relationships, a lot of the best photographers. I remember when I was teaching at Wayne State in journalism, and I had all these budding young journalists, and you know, some of them were, you know, wanted to go to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and some were thinking, okay, I might get a job at the local paper. I said, you know what? You know what the difference is between the people, the the writers who go to the local daily, the difference between them and the ones that go to the New York Times? You know what the difference is? They applied. They applied. They tried. Doesn't mean they got the job the first time, but they met an editor. They met people there. They know what the process is. They know what they're looking for, right? They say, oh, and they ask questions. Oh, what, you need these skills before you come back. Apply. There it goes again. Apply again. Apply again. And so the people who've applied, and it's the same thing with your photography. Set your sights on the kind of clients that you want. You may not get them immediately, but you can certainly ask the questions, what are you looking for? What does it take? Now, here's another scenario that I'd like to share, and I'll end on this, and we can talk and answer questions. And some of you have heard this story many times, I think, ad nauseum. But I think it's still valuable every time we talk about this as photographers. You know, there is no perfect time to be, you know, you don't have to necessarily pay your dues. I remember one time I went into a big agency, and And one of the big creative directors came in, and I was actually at the time representing a few photographers, and she went around and looked at all the work and all that, and I'm just, fresh and, new with this, not that new, but, I new to the game, I guess, and I started talking with her, small talk, and I said, yeah, and I know we have to earn our way up the ladder, and we're gonna earn our dues. We'll do what we have to do to work our way in here, and all blah 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 blah. Everything I said was wrong. Why? Because if she saw a photograph in any one of those portfolios as perfect for an opportunity next week, what would she have done? Hired me immediately. It had nothing to do with dues. It had nothing to do with it. You don't have to wait. Here's the thing. Young photographers getting in have to earn your dues? No, not necessarily. The point being is that, young photographers say, I need the experience, and over time, 20, 30 years from now, I'll be, I'll have the experience to get into those big companies, maybe 10 years from now. But, now I'm at my age, I have the 30 years experience plus, right? What are they looking for? Younger blood. Right. So, there is no right time. Right?
So true.
And so
Somebody found me a dagger.
my favorite story is Lindsay Adler, and many of you have heard this continuously.
Yes. I get emails from her every day.
Pardon?
I get emails from her almost every other
From
day.
Lindsay.
Crush.
She's.
No, it's not.
But
She just wants my money.
Lindsay, I met Lindsay when she was a year out of school, and we were going to New York to Photo Plus, and she heard that I was going there to speak, and she's like, oh wow, I want to meet you and a couple other people. She had like 200 followers on Twitter, and she, so I met her, and she had so much energy, and I'm like, oh my God, this person's going places, and I immediately pulled out my microphone. I interviewed her right then and there. This, before Lindsay Adler was Lindsay Adler, kind of just out of high school, but college. And the thing is, she was, Canada Explorer at the age of 30. She had traveled the world by then and worked for many big magazines. Why? Because she came to me that year and said, I want to write a book for photographers. For you. You're a year out of school, you want to... She didn't even think about, I have to earn my dues. She just went and did it and pounded on doors. That girl has so much energy, and she pounded on door after door after. She got no, no, no. And then one person would say yes, go do it. Then she'd knock on doors and say, well, they said yes. And then now there's two people. So it builds a snowball, but it's really hard work. It's where she got it. And she did, and it had nothing to do with age. It had nothing to do with how long she was in the business. She was doing things in just a few years, and we hear about that all the time. It is true, because she built a brand. She built a brand. She worked hard at it, but she built a brand. And that's how you get to those places. So there is no perfect time. You separate yourself from the competition. The only person that you're competing against is you. Thank you.